Hello, welcome to lesson 5 of Defying Gravity from Wicked by Stephen Schwartz, taken from Music for Stage and Screen Set Works from edXL GCSE. Have a moment to look over the bell work activity. You can pause it, have a look at the questions that you'll be answering when you enter this lesson. Our objectives for this lesson are to understand what is meant by augmentation of a melody, understand what an octatonic scale is, understand what polytonal and sus chords are, and finally, an analysis of the reprise of the intro right to the end. And this is the last lesson in the Defying Gravity sequence. So let's have a first look. So the coda. The coda is literally means the tail in Italian, and is a passage of music that brings the piece to an end. It's the final section. In Defying Gravity, in this section, you will find Alphaba singing at a slower tempo, getting louder and higher all the time, until holding the final note for 12 beats. Glinda at this point sings passionately as Alphaba flies off on a broomstick and the ensemble enters crying, "Look at her, she's wicked." Alphaba repeats, "Bring me down" on the final orchestral D, the lights black out for the end. So let's have a look at the augmentation. Oh, before that, it's worth noting that the coda begins with another interrupted cadence from D major. We're in D major, sorry, not from D major. We're in D major, and the cadence goes from A major, which is the 5th, to B minor, which is the 6th. Just a reminder that if it was a perfect cadence, we'd be going from A major to D major. But we're not. A major to B minor, so interrupted, and it's marked I can't even say this, my Italian's not very good, majestoso, which is majestic and stately. So the first thing we're going to look at is augmentation. In the Defying Gravity, coda combines a number of ideas. It's possibly the most technical section of the song. And the first thing is augmentation. So Alphaba sings an augmented version of the melody that starts the chorus. So that you've got the "It's Time to Try" part, just the main bit. So within that, you've got your leap of a 5th. And then what we hear at the end in the coda is the same melody, or we can call it a motif because it's been heard before, is now heard but with longer note values. So instead of this note here being quaver and then a tied 2 quavers and then a crotchet, we end up having 2 minims. So it's augmented it. It takes those notes and make them at a longer value. So it sounds slower. It features exactly the same notes we've heard before. This perfect 5th interval here that we've heard here, but it sounds longer. Instead of... So I'm going to play for you the one at the first chorus, and then the coda. Exactly the same notes, but we've taken them and we've made them longer, hence augmentation. Just a note, if we were to use diminution, it's the opposite. We take those notes and we make them shorter. Although we don't hear this in Defying Gravity, it's definitely a technique that you will hear throughout the set works for edXL. So what about an octatonic scale? The ensemble sing, "Look at her, she's wicked, get her." The melody for this comes from the opening number of the show, which is "No one mourns the wicked." And it's the melody from these words. The obsession with perfect 5ths that we hear throughout Wicked, we've just heard them in the augmentation, continue as the chorus sings this melody in 5ths. So we've got the first chord, which we've got... So that's the first chord we hear. So a chord made up of 5ths. But then we go to... and back to... and to together, we get that. To the words look at her. So if you're not sure, we're just doing these 3 chords here. And then we get what we call the octatonic scale. So we've got to bring her ascends. And he uses this octatonic scale, which the word oct is 8, which is an 8-note scale built from alternating tones. So in a major scale, we get tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. That's our major scale. In an octatonic scale, we basically alternate between tone and semitone. So, for example, we go from C, we get a tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone. So it creates an octatonic scale, slightly weird sounding. And we hear this in the lines, so we've got to bring her at the end of the coda in Defying Gravity, starting on a B. So if I show you, we go here. Well, let's get rid of that to start off with. Here we go. We go B, C sharp, D, E, F, G. If we take that in tone, we go B, so a tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone. And under that, so we've got to bring her are the notes. I'm going to play that again for you. And at tempo. So that's your octatonic scale. We then move on to another technique. So as I said, the Coda full of different techniques that we possibly haven't really heard throughout the rest of the piece. And we have one based on something we heard. We heard the bitonal passage in the bridge where you had 2 chords. I think it was an F and a B chord playing at the same time. And we have these polytonal chords, basically where we hear 2 chords from different keys being played at the same time. So, for example, in this one, on the word to, we hear an F major underneath a C major chord. So we hear this, quite weird sounding. On bring, we hear E flat major underneath a B major chord. And again, one more time. So E flat, B major, and together. And then on her, we hear a D flat major chord underneath a C major chord, which is really weirdly sounding. Let's get this right. Actually, it's played up here if we're going to do it right. So D flat major, and a C major, and we get this. Very, very weirdly sounding. If we write down all the notes that we hear in that last chord, this one in particular, on the word her, D flat major and C major, if we write them in order, we get C, D flat, E, F, G, and A flat. So we get those notes, which if you played them next to each other, sounds horrible. So C, D. That's if you played those notes as written next to each other. How they play it? Like that. Now, the first 2 chords that we hear, so F major and C major, kind of work because they're perfect fifth apart from each other. However, the last 2 chords we hear, C major and D flat major, as you can see from the notes, if they're written next to each other, are a semitone apart. Play it for you again. And that's really weird. It creates what we call a dissonance. Now, a dissonance is where you hear clashes in the music. So C and D flat together creates a very, very strong dissonance. It clashes with each other. Oh, you can hear Mr. Jones's class shouting next door at something they found exciting. Dissonance tends to be used a lot in horror music. If you have, let's get strings. There we go, string sound. In horror, you will end up getting dissonance being used in a high pitch to create that feeling of suspense. So dissonance used to create suspense. The final thing that we see is this idea of suspended chords. So when looking at music for a while, we will see, or we have seen, if we've already looked at it, how the chords were nearly all triads, either in root position, meaning if it's a C chord, the bottom note is a C, or first inversion, meaning that if it's a C chord, then the C moves to the top and the bottom note becomes an E. Root chord, first inversion. In Defying Gravity, the harmony is more complex, includes a number of what we call sus chords. Tea break. Sus stands for suspension, and like the melodic suspensions in music for a while, it is a chord that includes an almost dissonant note. Not as harsh as the chord we've just heard, but it's a note that doesn't necessarily fit in with the rest of the chord. 9 times out of 10, it's the third of the chord. So if we're looking at a C chord, it's the middle note, E, that tells us the tonality. We looked at that with our bare fifth chords in a previous lesson. Is either replaced by the second note of the scale or the fourth note of the scale. And it gives us an idea of suspension. We've not quite resolved that piece. It feels like the music's up in the air and it's not come down to where it should be, the tonality of the piece. So if I'm playing a suspension chord, you want it to resolve back to, but we don't get that. We get this idea of it being suspended. So here is a C chord. And here is a C sus4 chord. If you have a look at the PowerPoint, you've got your G chord here, so G, B, D. We move to a G sus2, which is G, A, D. So G, G sus2. Now we have a C chord and our C sus4, which is the added fourth. All numbers based on intervals of the scale. And there's loads of them throughout the piece. If you listen to the main motif, that note there is a suspended second. It's a G suspended second. If it wasn't a suspended chord, we'd get this. Kind of feels more magical with the suspension. And that is one of the other techniques used on chords in Defying Gravity. So here is the review section. Although it says consolidated learning, it is the review section. Have a look through the questions, try and answer them yourself. Make sure you read through all the information on this page, get revising, and look out for the learning map, which you need to be completing as well. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you.